recording this podcast, regions across the world are engaged in some sort of a turmoil, with an ongoing war, a rumored coup, protests brewing across different nations. The world right now seems like a geopolitical hotbed. To help us understand these issues and help us put things into perspective, today we are joined by Professor Harsh Pant. Thank you for joining us for this short interview, sir. Professor Harsh Pant is Vice President of Foreign Policy at Observer Research Foundation, New Delhi. He is also the Professor of International Relations at King's India Institute at King's College London. His most recent books include India and Global Governance, A Rising Power and Its Discontents, Politics and Geopolitics, Decoding India's Neighborhood Challenge, America and Indo-Pacific, Trump and Beyond, India's Nuclear Policy, and India's Afghan Model. In addition to this, Professor Pant also writes regularly for various Indian and international media outlets, including the Wall Street Journal, the Japan Times, the Hindustan Times, Mint, the Diplomat, and the Telegraph. We are very honored to have you, sir. We're very excited to have this chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
So, with that, I'll start with my first question, which pertains to the red hot topic of the Russian-Ukraine situation right now. So, do you think that there is a Putin pushback, and do you think that diplomacy can play a role in mediating the ongoing crisis as we are seeing it unfold?
Well, I don't think at the moment it looks as if diplomacy is being taken very seriously by either of the two sides, because both sides are intent on having their political objectives being met. Now, I think what has happened in the recent weeks is that Ukraine has gained some battlefield advantages, and they have been more successful in certain areas of Ukraine. And there is a lot of pressure on Vladimir Putin to deliver. So he has talked about nuclear weapons and threatened that he might be willing to use them. He has also brought in conscription in some ways, that he's bringing in people for drafting for military role. And there is a lot of resentment brewing in Russia about that, because people don't want to fight. They don't see this war as a necessary. A lot of them don't see this war as a necessary one. So I think there is certainly pressure on Putin. But on the other side, you have Ukraine, which is also at the moment not interested in a negotiated settlement, because it believes it has the momentum. It can also push back a bit further. And then there is no intermediary available. There was some reports that suggested Mexican Prime Minister, for example, a Mexican President, I think, suggested that certain people should be given this role, including Mr. Modi. But I don't think there is any formal structured diplomatic process that is available, and both sides do not seem particularly interested in diplomacy at this point. I think either side would want to undertake diplomacy once they have had some battlefield successes. Though you don't want to go into diplomacy, into negotiations, being the weaker party. So I think both sides struggling to gain momentum and then do some negotiating. But at the moment, it looks very bleak.
Rightly said, sir. You've written also a lot about Indo-Pacific. So I'd like to move on now from the north to the east. And I would like to ask you, what is your opinion about the role of India in the Indo-Pacific, and what do you think are the geopolitical connotations of the same?
Well, India, I would think that without India, there won't be any Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific exists because we think of Indian Ocean and Pacific Oceans being together, and India playing a very important role there. Now, for India, it is important that the Indo-Pacific as a maritime space remains free of instability, and countries around Indo-Pacific continue to work towards economic prosperity. But unfortunately, what is also happening is that we are seeing a power transition. We are seeing the rise of China. We are seeing US-China contestation. We are seeing other smaller countries being targeted by certain countries, and that means that while India may want stability is not going to come just by wishing it. So India will have to do more both in terms of providing a security alternative as well as an economic alternative to the regional states. So India's role is certainly critical. Much would depend on what kind of partnerships India is willing to craft with the like-minded countries. There is certainly a lot has been talked about, a lot has been said about the Quad, which is India, US, Japan and Australia relationship, partnership. But there are several others as well. As we know, in the region there are a lot of trilaterals that India is engaged with. There are a lot of engagements in terms of smaller niche platforms that India is part of. But ultimately, India's success in the Indo-Pacific would depend on how successful India is, not only in keeping the momentum of its economic growth at home and becoming a reliable interlocutor for some of those states which are feeling the pressure from this geopolitical rivalry between US and China. So if countries in the region want that geopolitical contestation should not impinge on them, then I think that's where India can play an important role in making sure that space is available for countries to work outside that contested space.
So you mentioned about China's ascent and how it is encroaching in the Indo-Pacific, which has traditionally been seen as India's, at least the Indian Ocean has been seen as India's strength. So in that regard, I wanted to ask you, the politics of Indo-Pacific, as you mentioned, has been changing at a very fast pace. And especially after, the announcement of BRI and its claim over the 9-line. So in that regard, what do you think is the future of rule-based order in Indo-Pacific?
The future of rules-based order is contingent upon what countries that believe in rule of law are willing to do for it. So if you do not see a more concerted effort by like-minded countries who believe in rule of law, giving a pushback against countries like China which do not believe in rule of law, then I think the future is not going to be very effective or very, very positive. And therefore, it is important that those who believe in the rule of law, those who believe in international law, they should be working more closely together. It is beginning to happen, but I think China's role, China's power is at an all-time high, and it would require certain push from other like-minded countries that want to push back against that kind of aggression by China that we have witnessed in recent years, to make a more concerted effort. So rule of law should be an important principle for countries like India to uphold, because that gives smaller states, smaller countries a lot of room to maneuver. Otherwise, I think, as we were discussing, they will be, they'll get suffocated because of the great power contestation that is beginning to happen in full force.
So it all boils down to the law of order and the right kind of partnership with like-minded countries.
Indeed.
So, yeah. Thank you for sharing your insights, sir. It has been quite an honor to have this discussion with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.